Hello, I'm Tracy Grimshaw. Welcome to a special edition of A Current Affair. Tonight, the never-before-heard confessions of Malcolm Naden, the cold-blooded killer who murdered members of his own family and went on the run for 7 years. I'm here with Detective Superintendent Mick Willing from the New South Wales Homicide Squad, who led the investigation, and it was his team who eventually tracked Naden down. And Mick, we're going to speak further after Dimity Clancy's report, but have you ever had a confession or known a confession like this?
Certainly not in my experience, Tracy, but this is an unusual case, and Malcolm Naden is an unusual person.
He certainly is, and we're going to get an insight into that tonight. Just a warning, this report contains confronting moments and distressing scenes, and Indigenous viewers are advised it contains images of deceased persons.
I, Malcolm Naden. I've killed people close to me, and I have confessed to doing it.
Just the way he described a cold-blooded murder, just so casually.
Tried to give clear and honest
He was a murderer, and we didn't even know it.
Australia's most wanted man has disappeared again.
Part of his motivation for staying on the run for so long was to avoid the temptation of killing again.
Life shone in her trusting eyes, and now, nothing.
There was a devil sort of look in his face.
She crossed from life to death in an instant.
It was no holds barred after that.
I'd like to say I feel something for the victims, but it would be a lie.
We've always known Malcolm Naden is a depraved, cold-blooded and deeply disturbed person. But perhaps even more disturbing is what we didn't know until now. Naden has an intelligence that will shock you. He's eloquent, thoughtful, with a sound understanding of his own twisted mind. In his words, he gives a brutal insight into his murderous ways and life in the bush as one of Australia's most wanted criminals. In his own confession, Malcolm Naden leaves nothing to the imagination. Letitia Nolan, Christy Scholes. Two young women living in the New South Wales Central West town of Dubbo, on the banks of the Macquarie River.
Young girls that were starting life with their families, and they wanted to be there for their kids when they grew up.
Margaret Walker is Letitia's aunt. She watched the girls grow up together and grow up with their killer too. His name is Malcolm Naden.
He was a loner. He was never a person to go out, make friends.
A loner, a murderer who'd spend 7 years on the run, one step ahead of police.
In his own words, he said, conscience is like a wall, a brick wall. Once you knock it down, you can't ever put it back. You can't build it back up.
Malcolm Naden said, "Thank God it's over. I've had enough."
Police aimed a laser-like focus to capture Malcolm Naden, but they found themselves in new territory once they had their man: how to prove he killed Letitia and Christy.
But as soon as I asked him about the murder investigations, that was it. There was clearly a line drawn. I don't want to talk about those right now.
Is that what he'd say to you?
Yeah.
He didn't want to talk about it, but certainly he said, he qualified in it that he didn't want to talk about it right then.
Ricky Hennessy and Paul Mangan are homicide detectives. It was their job to make a case against a murderous misfit stick.
The obvious strategy presented itself that, we'll feel like writing things down. We'll leave you some questions and you can spend as much time in your own space to write what you want to write, and we'll take it from there.
The case against Malcolm Naden was strong, circumstantially, but far from a certainty in an Australian court. Police even feared, without stronger evidence, Naden might even be granted bail. When they left one of their many prison visits, they were under immense pressure. They needed anything they could get from him, and what they did get astonished everyone.
It was chilling. It was like a novel.
The purpose of this information is to hopefully shed some light on the disappearance and murder of Letitia Nolan.
It's the confession, 25 pages of it. Honest, neatly written, detailed, brutal.
I saw her car parked out the front on the road. I didn't know how long she had been there or how long it would be before she left. The point I'm trying to make is it was a chance meeting, unfortunate for her. A few minutes earlier or later, we would have missed each other and maybe she would still be alive.
Where are you going?
Fishing.
On the left?
Yes, please.
It was a hot summer evening. Malcolm claims his cousin Letitia Nolan offered him a lift to Sandy Beach to go fishing.
I want to know what you're up to and if you're doing anything about it.
I told you how many times.
It's not even a 10-minute drive, but enough time for Letitia to ask a question that would infuriate Naden and unknowingly seal her fate.
Alright, just watch it.
I want to make it very clear right now. One thing that really shits me is gossip. I avoid it as much as possible and try not to partake in any of it. When we arrived at Sandy Beach, I was whipped up into a rage, to say the least. But looking from the outside at me, you would never have known. I'm not someone who shows visible emotion.
Pull him over.
I'm more likely to keep things inside, as I did on this occasion. Poor Letitia didn't even see it coming. She didn't even know death was travelling with us and that it would take her that night. I still can't believe it. Letitia stopped to let me out. I reached around and grabbed Letitia by the throat with the purpose to strangle her.
Letitia never screamed for help. She never pleaded for mercy. Her almighty struggle for life lasted only moments before she died in her cousin's arms.
I sat in the back briefly, just looking at her. She was so peaceful, so quiet, so empty. I've never seen a body so relaxed, not even in sleep. She crossed from life to death in an instant. She was just gone. I wanted her to say something, to speak again, maybe even just a movement, but death makes no sound. It has no movements, it's final.
A lot of this you'd think is fantasy, is a novel.
Yeah, he's like he wrote a story. Yeah, and a horror story.
Aunt Marg heard and witnessed the moment Naden drove off with her niece. She has no doubt Malcolm killed Letitia, but doesn't believe his story about their chance meeting.
It says here at this point that Letitia offers him a lift.
No,
Why don't you believe it?
because she didn't like him and she wouldn't have never have put him in the car with her. Yeah, you would never give him a lift.
Whatever the truth, Malcolm had become the creature deep down he always knew he'd been. Having spent years reflecting on the night he became a killer, Naden references the Bible, Adam and Eve, original sin.
The awakening they must have felt, the knowledge they had just gained, I knew exactly how they must have felt in that moment. Something changes in you. Something breaks or is switched off or on. Something happens. You may think killing is killing, but it's not. I'm sure it affects people differently, both the killer and the killed.
From the Bible to Hollywood, and this speech from Clint Eastwood from the movie Unforgiven.
It's a hell of a thing, killing a man. You take away all he's got and all he's ever gonna have.
Note to reader, if you can, avoid violence, especially killing. You'll never be the same again.
Naden has committed his first murder. Now he needs to dispose of Letitia Nolan's body. He puts her in the passenger seat and drives further up the road to Butler's Falls. In perhaps a fleeting moment of remorse, he shifts Letitia into a more comfortable position.
Even though Letitia was dead, thanks to me, and the dead feel nothing, know nothing. Seeing her like she was, I just couldn't leave her like that.
Malcolm Naden was right. Letitia could feel nothing, not even the small comforts offered to her by her cousin, her killer. Just when you thought Naden might be capable of feeling something himself. What he does next is so horrifying, the details have been suppressed by the courts. It happened right here, at night. No one was around, and Naden was free to do what he liked.
What a scene, huh? Picture it if you can. There's me, sitting on the ground, in the dark. God only knows what time of night it was. A dead body in the car next to me. My own cousin who never wronged me in any way. Who, maybe 40 minutes earlier, was alive and well. Life shone in her trusting eyes. And now, nothing. Quiet, silent, nothing. She was just gone. I'd look at her hundreds of times before, but never really studied her like I did at that moment. She really was beautiful. Death and I robbed her of life, but her beauty remained intact.
A beauty Malcolm would destroy in the hours that followed. He dismembered Letitia's body and buried her. He tried his best to get rid of the evidence. Malcolm dumped Letitia's car back at Sandy Beach and walked home. Dawn was about to break. He was a new man, and he was hungry.
I ate my food and slept like the dead. Then, to answer my unspoken thought, outside, heard laughter of playing children. They were Letitia's now orphan children.
And still, no remorse. Even as Naden watched his family become desperate to find their loved one.
We used to search the roadsides, the riverbanks, the roads, the gutters, the drains, but he never ever offered to go looking for anything.
So to say I didn't care to hear about Letitia isn't being cold-hearted. I knew what happened to her, and what I did hear bored me even more.
He'd gotten away with murder. 6 months later, he was ready to kill again. This time, he'd make sure people knew who he was. Naden would strangle, rape and murder Christy Scholes, his cousin's girlfriend.
This inhumane act I did without thought or feeling. I clothed her like she was a life-size doll and then placed her body amongst pillows and blankets to make her comfortable.
The way that she laughed, she had a beautiful laugh. And I can't forget it. It's always there, it's impinged in my memory, you know.
How Christy must have felt in the final moments of her life still haunts her uncle, Tony Scholes.
Oh, I just hope he realises that what he's done has destroyed our family and his family and created a lot of problems for himself.
There were no reasons for my actions. It was really senseless, uncaring, and regrettable waste of life for both her and Letitia. I'd like to say I feel something for the victims, but it would be a lie.
How could you not feel anything after you did that to somebody?
Dubbo detective Sue Ellen Scott was the first police officer called to the scene. She found Christy's body in Malcolm's bedroom.
Well, prior to then, we didn't know anything about Malcolm Naden, so and we actually didn't even in fact know that he was living there. So absolutely, that's when a search and investigations into this person who was Malcolm Naden commenced.
And so began the manhunt for Malcolm Naden. From the Dubbo Zoo to the town's local golf club, Malcolm knew he had to flee his hometown. His dogged determination not to be caught would see him travel more than 300 kilometres on foot, at all times keeping authorities guessing his next move.
So to have some near misses, that was really hard to deal with. It got the hopes up of everyone involved only to have them dashed, and there were times there where we thought, well, starting back at square one.
Each time you came to a dead end was incredibly frustrating.
Then, as police closed in, one of their own went down when a desperate Naden fired at officers.
And it obviously upped the ante then once a police officer was shot. It was no holds barred after that.
After 7 years battling the dense bushland, he became the ghost of Barrington Tops.
It's certainly a lesson in what the human body can endure, because we were out there and experienced the climate, and to be able to understand that this guy survived for that long is nothing short of remarkable.
Naden would do whatever it took to survive.
Beggars can't be choosers, you know. I would eat wild animals ranging from snakes, goannas, porcupines, birds. I even tried worms. God, they were awful. Tasted like shit. I felt sick.
Food became a luxury.
People would have barbecues that night. I would search the bins. About 5 separate times I found loaves of bread.
He would break into isolated homesteads to steal weapons and supplies.
I slept in the open, exposed to rain, dew, freezing conditions. I was amazed at how quickly I adapted.
As the years passed, Naden's confidence grew, as did his will not to give himself up.
The reality is that the terrain, the weather out there, without any creature comforts of the modern world, is going to take its toll, and it clearly was.
Naden's deteriorating state eventually allowed police to get the upper hand. Then, on the 22nd of March 2012, the police command post started to buzz when Malcolm Naden walked straight into their trap.
On that night there was something different, and we were positive right from the outset that this was going to be our guy. The tensions were pretty high, everyone was very anxious, but on the night it went like clockwork.
At this isolated shack west of Gloucester, officers finally cornered a tired, ragged fugitive.
The first words out of his mouth were, "He's Malcolm Naden." He then went on to say that he was glad that it was over, that he'd finally been caught. There was a sense of relief.
Did you expect that reaction from him?
No, not at all.
So then you guys get in front of him for the first time. What does he look like and how does he smell?
Not anywhere near as bad as most people would probably expect. He was caked in mud from head to toe, so I think that helped keep the smell down. But he looked very malnourished. That's the first thing that struck me. This is a man who has not survived well for a long period of time.
After so long removed from civilization, nobody expected Malcolm Naden to be willing or even able to hold a conversation.
He was extremely polite, courteous, he spoke well, he understood what he was saying, and he was quite frank and open.
He doesn't genuinely feel remorse, he just knows what he did was wrong.
As far as court cases go, Malcolm Naden's was straightforward. He spared his family months, if not years, of added pain when he pleaded guilty to the 2 murders and every other crime he was accused of. During his sentencing, Naden was extremely anxious as the judge read out his punishments. He was fidgeting, looking around, seemingly desperate. But as soon as the judge said the words, "life in prison," Naden took a deep breath and sat back in his chair. He was happy.
Have you ever seen that before?
No, not in my experience,
No,
but we knew his goal was life imprisonment. It's what he wanted. You tell us where it was.
But I have no intentions of ever wanting to leave prison. This is my home now. This is where I live. And this is where I will die.
Detective Sergeant Mangan paid Malcolm Naden a visit at Goulburn's Supermax prison just a few months ago to tell him a handful of Letitia's bones had been found at the spot where he'd confessed to burying her. Detective Scott informed Letitia's family.
The best, but the worst news I've been able to deliver anybody. And that bittersweet feeling is...
It's still bittersweet.
Incredibly. Incredibly.
Even more bittersweet for Malcolm Naden's loved ones. Now they know when he wrote his 25-page horrific confession, he was telling the truth.
What has Malcolm done to your family?
He took away things, I think, but he hasn't split the family up. So...
And he won't really?
No. No.
What he did was horrific, and no child should have to grow up without their mother, and no mother should have to lose their daughter in the way that Malcolm Naden stole these girls from their families.
If you could sit down face to face with him, what would you say?
I don't want to sit down with him. I don't want to see him. I don't want to come face to face with him.
It's a story that will forever haunt the community of Dubbo, and one not even Malcolm Naden himself will ever fully comprehend.
Reliving it has drained me mentally. Emotionally, I feel nothing. My head understands the awful truth of what I've done, but my emotions won't engage. Maybe this madness will hopefully be explained. But it'll never make any sense.